Good evening, everyone. It is a great honor to welcome you all to today's webinar, where we will explore the future of malaria diagnostics, a critical topic in the global fight against this life-threatening disease. We are privileged to have with us Dr. Shelgaonkar, the operations and consultant operations head at the Laboratory Medicine Department at the Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital here in Indore. Dr. Shelgaonkar comes with a vast amount of experience, be it the corporate sector at Max or the chain diagnostic labs at Suburban. And he comes with this varied experience set, which makes him the ideal candidate to explain to us how malaria diagnostics should be handled going forward, keeping the Indian conditions in mind. With years of expertise in clinical diagnostics and a commitment to advancing healthcare solutions, Dr. Shelgaonkar will provide invaluable insights into the evolving landscape of malaria detection. As we move towards global malaria elimination goals, accurate and timely diagnosis remains the cornerstone of effective treatment and control. This session will cover several parts, including cutting-edge technologies, challenges towards drug-resistant malaria, and probably innovation as well in point-of-care testing in the field of malaria diagnosis. And it looks to be a forward-looking discussion. So we would love to answer all your questions, all your queries, and you can put in your questions in the Q&A box. And at the end of the session, I will request the doctor to kindly address those questions, right? So I look forward to an engaging session and encourage you to share your thoughts. All the best. Over to you, Dr. Shelgaonkar.
Yeah, thank you, Arjun, for the kind introduction. So we will be starting ahead with the topic, which is common to all pathologists, all technicians working in lab sectors and hospital sectors, uh, malaria. So malaria diagnostics, the way ahead, what we have ahead. So I'm Dr. Gaurav Shelgaonkar. As I already told, I'm consultant and operational head at Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital in Nov'. So we will be discussing about malaria on the following outlines. First of all, we will discuss about the updates on mosquito-transmitted malaria in the world and India. We will discuss about the epidemiology of malaria and the clinical presentations. Then we will discuss about the main part for which this talk has been held is the diagnosis and advancement in malaria diagnostic. So, and then we will briefly discuss treatment and then prevention for malaria. So, when we talk about malaria, as per WHO globally in 2022, there were an estimated 249 million malaria cases. And out of them, 8,000 malaria deaths were reported in 85 countries. So, malaria was a leading cause of death and disease worldwide. It is next to TB when we talk about the deaths in the world for benign diseases. Particularly, it affects children under 5 and pregnant women. So all patients who are immunocompromised, having HIV, pregnant women, under 5-year children, travelers are having a higher risk of severe infection. Malaria today is usually restricted to tropical and subtropical areas and altitudes below 1500 meters. So when we talk about malaria, we talk about Plasmodium parasite. And there are 5 types of Plasmodium parasite, which we will be discussing in detail afterwards. But the main uh, parasites are Falciparum and Vivax. And Falciparum is the deadliest one, while the Vivax is one of the most dominant malaria parasite in most of the countries. Other malaria species are Plasmodium malariae, Plasmodium ovale, and Knowlesi. So, malaria still remains one of the major public health problems, second to TB in India. The country carries 1.7% of the global malaria case burden and 1.2% of the global malaria deaths. And you will be astonished that 85.2% of the malaria burden in Southeast Asia is in India. And 47% of the global Plasmodium vivax malaria burden is in India and Southeast Asia. So, the epidemiology of malaria. is quite complex, and because of the geographical and ecological diversity, malaria in India is mainly caused by two parasites, as already mentioned prior. This disease is transmitted by 9 Anopheles species, of which 6 are primary vectors. So Anopheles is the mosquito which actually bites and spreads malaria. When we talk about Anopheles, there are few species of Anopheles stephensi, which is usually predominant in urban areas, while Culicifacius is there in rural areas, and Flu vitalis is in hilly areas. Apart from that, there are other species too: Anopheles minimus, Anopheles philippensis, Anopheles sandaicus, and maculatus. So, malaria usually affects all population groups, regardless of gender, and children's pregnant women are at higher risk, as already told. So in India, during June to September, there is a monsoon season, and then there is collection of water coming in, and that's where malaria starts in and is more prevalent in northeastern, eastern, and central parts of the country. This is due to a number of factors such as hilly and forest areas, number of slow-moving streams, inadequate access and health infrastructure, which ultimately gives us a disadvantage. And there is a lack of awareness too in India, especially in the tribal and marginalized population. So we talked about malaria in India, but how the world is doing when we talk about health and malaria. So world is almost spending 17 point, when we talk about US, it spends 17.9% of the gross domestic product to public health. In China, it's 9.2%, while in India, it's 1.9% of the gross domestic product, which we are investing onto health, public health sector. And Indian Health Ministry goal is to reach 2.5%. So still we are way, way behind, and we have to work very much for our country. Uh, there are only 35% population who has access to essential medicines. There are still healthcare infrastructure deficiencies, which government is trying to improve, and there are still deficient healthcare resources from doctors, nurses, and there is still limited healthcare insurance penetration. So these factors needs to improve, but let's talk about malaria first. So when we talk about malaria, the Anopheles mosquito bites and ultimately what symptoms a person gets. So mostly the symptoms are fever, headache, chills, nausea, vomiting, muscle aches can be there. These symptoms corroborate with the viral flu-like illness which is coming in years. So it's very tough to confirm that malaria is there in the body or not. So there is over treatment of malaria these days by the local general practitioners. So proper diagnosis and timely diagnostics. Malaria is very important. So when a mosquito bites, usually it takes 10 to 15 days of 10 to 15 days uh, uh, to start the symptoms. So the normal symptoms I have already covered. Now the severe symptoms are extreme tiredness, impaired consciousness, multiple convulsions, difficulty in breathing, dark or bloody urine, jaundice, and abnormal bleeding. So first we will discuss about the malaria life cycle. When we talk about the malaria plasmodium life cycle, there are two phases. One is the phase which goes into the mosquito, Anopheles, which is the sexual phase or the sporogony phase. And the second is the asexual phase, which happens in human, which is also called as schizogony phase. So, when a mosquito bites, the sporocytes are released from the salivary gland of the mosquito to the liver cells, which ultimately goes to the liver cells, and the liver cells are infected, a scisont is made, and then multiple merocytes are formed, which ultimately infects multiple RBCs afterwards. These RBCs go through a life cycle of Plasmodium, in which first stage which comes is immature trophocyte stage, and the ring stage is the first thing which we see on the peripheral smear when we see the RBCs. So these RBCs are ultimately our source to diagnose malaria. We can't do a biopsy of liver cell to check if malaria is there or not. So first of all, we check for immature trophocytes. Then the trophocyte matures and it becomes mature trophocytes. Then a scisont is formed, and then scisont ruptures. Merocytes came in, and lot of chemical cytokines are released, So the patient gets fever and the symptoms are known to the patient that I am getting some febrile illness. So these merocytes are then ultimately uh, converted into gametes, and then this mosquito Anopheles again bites that same person, and this gametes are transmitted into its body, forming micro and macro gametocytes, which ultimately fuse together to form a ookinete, which is a movable gamete, movable zygote. Then it converts into oocyst, and ultimately the oocyst ruptures and releases sporocytes into the salivary gland of the mosquito. So this is the life cycle of a Plasmodium species. So its sexual phase goes into the mosquito and asexual phase goes into the human body. When we talk about the merocytes continue to burst from RBCs and infect again new RBCs. So this cycle goes on and on. And usually there is a periodic cycle of 48 to 72 hours, depending upon the species, which causes the fever spikes coming in. So when we talk about the pre-patent or the incubation period, it varies. When sporocytes come inside, ring forms are the first asexual forms that can be demonstrated in the peripheral blood. So the cycle varies, incubation period varies. It's 5 days in falciparum, in vivax it's 8 days, oval 13, and malaria 9 days. So we discussed about the malaria life cycle. I just skipped one point. This is the infective stage, you see. And when we have the RBC infection coming in, and trophocytes and cytosines are formed, this is the diagnostic phase. This is where we can diagnose malaria. So, talking about Plasmodium, we have 5 types of Plasmodium species. Plasmodium falciparum is predominant species in the world. Vivax and ovale. Ovale is not found in India, but both of them are very common in sub-Saharan Africa and but their geographic ranges do overlap. These two species are not always distinguishable on the basis of morphological characteristic, and molecular tools will help clarify their diagnosis and exact distribution. So distinguishing Vivax and ovale is a tough task. Then we come to Plasmodium malariae, which is having a wide global distribution, being found in South America, Asia, Africa, but it is less frequent than Plasmodium falciparum. Plasmodium malariae may cause severe malaria. Usually it is seen in small foothills of Orisha in India. Then there is Plasmodium knowlesi, which is found in the Southeast Asia. But the predominant ones are the falciparum and vivax in India. So Vivax do one thing which other Plasmodium doesn't do. So when we discussed about the life cycle, we saw that there are sporozoites coming in, they are infecting the hepatocytes, and ultimately they are releasing merocytes from the liver cell. But there is a stage in Plasmodium which is called as developmentally arrested hypnozoid. So these merocytes are not released, and the Plasmodium vivax species is being dormant in the liver cell. This stage is called as hypnozoid. And this hypnozoid stage can't be detected by microscopy or any other malaria test. That's why we can't diagnose this latent infection of Plasmodium vivax, which creates recurrent infection in the person. The dormant hypnocytes are refractory to radical cure drugs and blood stage infections. The trigger for hypnocyte reactivation and re-establishment of blood parasitemia still remains unclear. So we don't know when they will again reactivate and release merocyte in the body. So this was about the Plasmodium vivax latent infection or the hypnocyte stage. Now we will come on to the diagnostic criteria for Plasmodium for detecting Plasmodium. Excuse me. So when we talk about WHO says that a proper rapid test requires that we can detect Plasmodium vivax with 75% accuracy at 200 parasites per microliter. So WHO says that all rapid diagnostic test kits should detect at least 200 parasites per microliter, which is the WHO pre-qualification process for any card. And the pyrogenic threshold, why WHO says this is because the pyrogenic threshold of Plasmodium vivax is when the parasites cross 200 parasites per microliter, a level at which current RDT may still reduce sensitivity. So rapid diagnostic test identify Plasmodium antigen using immunochromatographic technique or the lateral flow assay. There is a antibody which is coated on the card, and it ultimately binds to the malaria antigen and conjugated to either liposome containing selenium dye or gold particle, which ultimately makes a control line visible, a test line visible, so that we can know that the patient is having Plasmodium infection. So when we talk about the rapid diagnostic kits or rapid diagnostic test kits, it has three principles. There are three antigens which a kit can be made on. First is HRP. HRP is histidine-rich protein 2, which is specific to Plasmodium falciparum. While second is Plasmodium-specific aldolase and Plasmodium-associated lactate dehydrogenase. So, HRP2 is specific to Plasmodium falciparum, while aldolase and lactate dehydrogenase are common to all Plasmodium species. When we talk about HRP is having one, two, three different types of proteins, but 2 is the most commonly secreted protein, and that's why mostly all kits are manufactured as per HRP2. Whereas, when we talk about a rapid kit, it should have a high negative predictive value so that we can very well know that it's not malaria. And that's why rapid diagnostic kits are being used to detect asymptomatic malaria, especially for conducting periodic mass blood surveys. However, contrarily to traditional microscopy, rapid test kits don't provide an estimate of the parasite density, and their specificity for malaria attributable fever is highly variable. So they can't tell you how much parasites are there. They will just say it's a qualitative test, right? They will just say positive or negative. So sometimes they can come false positive, like in cases of heterophile anti-mouse antibodies, which can give a false positive result in LDS-based assays. While if the sample is having very high hematocrit or more RBCs, then also a false positive value can be there. So we should know that gametocytes of plasmid. There is one more thing where false positive test can be there, is when gametocytes of Plasmodium falciparum can persist. So we have given a treatment for falciparum, and the gametocytes are still persisting into the blood. This may cause a false positive rapid test, while it doesn't require treatment. So we should know when a card is false positive. So this is about the three cards which are there. One is HRP2 based, second is LDS based, and third is aldolase based. HRP2 is a water-soluble protein, LDS is soluble glycolytic enzyme, and aldolase is also an enzyme. It is specific to falciparum, as I already told. LDH and aldolase are released by all species. HRP2 and LDH are very stable kits. That's why most of the kits are usually companies are using HRP2 and LDH. While aldolase is less stable than HRP2 and LDH. So, when HRP2 is released, so it is produced by trophocytes and young but not mature gametocytes of falciparum. So, most commonly, stages in between trophocytes to young gametocyte stage is generally picked up by card-based test. We can't detect malaria on rapid test if the stage is just prior to this. So the liver stage can't be diagnosed. It can be diagnosed only when the blood RBCs have been converted to trophocytes or young gametocytes. So LDH is released mostly by all asexual and sexual stages of the live parasite and usually positive in most of the stages. So this is about the three parameters, and so there are different kits available. One kit which is from Plasmodium, which uses LDH and HRP2 both. If you use only LDH for falciparum, we have only HRP2 kit. For the common falciparum and vivax card, we have HRP2 LDH kit. So, rapid diagnostic test that target HRP2 of falciparum shows antigenemia to persist longer than parasitemia. Hence, this test is unsuitable for assessment of treatment failure. So, we can't do a prognostic thing with these tests. Newer tests that target LDH, which is elaborated only by live parasite, has the possibility to monitor treatment, but still, studies are going on for this. So this was about the rapid diagnostic test kits, the principle, the antigens which they focus on, and the false positive, when they are false positive, when we should worry, and we should not use it for prognosis of the patient, but it is having a very high negative predictive value. Then we come on to the microscopy of malaria. So for microscopy or the morphological analysis, we need a thick and thin blood film, which is preferred to be JMitra stain for the diagnosis of malaria infection. We can also stain it by Leishman too, but the pigments and the stages are more prominent in JMitra stain smears. And microscopy can detect up to 50 parasites per microliter of blood. Gypsa is preferred cell, as I told, because it will show us Supner's dot, Morris, cleft, everything going on in the RBC in a better way. So so we talk about thick and thin blood smear. Thick blood smear is like this. This is the thick blood smear, and this is the thin blood smear, tongue sepet smear, as we say. The thick blood smear is spread on a clean, dry microscopic slide and is allowed to dry 10 to 16 minutes and is not fixed by methanol so that the erythrocytes lies because of the osmotic swelling, leaving the leukocytes and parasite if present. And we can see lot of malaria parasite on a small drop of blood. And the limit of detection for a thick blood smear is 4 to 20 parasites per microliter. So please make it a practice to see a thick smear first and then a thin smear afterwards for all malaria tests. So when we talk about the morphology of malaria, this is the thick smear and this is the thin smear. There are four parasites, and the most common parasites are falciparum and vivax, which we will be talking about in this webinar. So, most important difference between the falciparum and vivax is the size of the RBC. In falciparum, the size of the RBC remains same; it is not enlarged. While in vivax, the size of the RBC is enlarged. The shape of the RBC is round, sometimes crenated in falciparum, while it will be same round or oval in vivax. The color will be normal. The stippling, there will be morar spots appear as large red spots. We will discuss it afterwards when we will be seeing the slide pics. And there will be loops and clefts too in the falciparum. While in vivax, it will be Suffner dots. Malaria, we will be having Siemens dot. And in ovale, we will be having Suffner dots again, known as James dot. These are numerous small red dots. So the pigment usually in falciparum is black or dark brown, while in vivax it's golden brown granules scattered throughout the cytoplasm. In malaria it's black or brown again, and in ovale it's intermediate between vivax and red. The trophozoite is large in vivax, while it's small and delicate in falciparum. Schizont is again large in vivax and medium in falciparum. The gametocyte is characteristically crescent shaped banana shaped in falciparum and spherical in vivax. So this was the theoretical part, which is very boring. We always read this and we forget. So when we see the slide now, we'll first discuss vivax. So first, when the merocytes are released from the liver, then the merocytes infect the RBCs, and ring forms are the first forms which are seen on a smear. This is the thick smear and these are the thin smear photos. So thick smear shows a single large chromatin dot, as you can see. Rings may be difficult to distinguish from those of Plasmodium ovale. So ovale and vivax are very goes hand to hand, and ovale is usually not there in India, so we will be not discussing much about Plasmodium ovale here. The cytoplasm you can see becomes amoeboid, may appear as trophocytes mature. Infected RBCs, as I already told, are larger than other RBCs, and mostly multiple infected RBCs are uncommon. So you can see this is the ring form, this is the ring form, this is the ring form, this is the ring form. This is the thin smear and this is the thick smear where you can see the ring forms again. This is a neutrophil. So then the ring form becomes a developing trophocyte. So when we talk about trophocyte, the RBC becomes increasingly amoeboid with tenous pseudopodial processes and large vacuoles. As you can see, there are vacuoles too, and Suffner's dot. Here you can see the Suffner's dot. So what Plasmodium does is it utilizes the hemoglobin of the RBC, and then the pigment is created, which is called as the malarial pigment, or which is made up of hematin, excess protein, and iron. This is the again a thick smear showing trophocyte. As you can see, there is pigment and there is a cytosol coming. This is again trophocyte. The RBC, as you can see, is bigger. Here you can see the dots, which is called as Suffner dot. Then the developing trophocyte becomes a trophocyte, proper trophocyte. Again, you can see the RBC is bigger and you can see pigment, brown pigments, yellowish brown pigments, and a band form. But this band form, you should not mistake it. Mistaken is as Plasmodium malariae. Plasmodium malariae is usually having a band form like this. And the pigment in Plasmodium malariae will be darker and coarse. While in vivax, it will be fine granules. While in malaria, it will be coarse granules. You can see here. These are fine granules. These are coarse granules. The infected RBCs are also noticeably larger than uninfected RBC that we know. So after the trophocyte, we see the developing scission stage, myelocytes coming in inside. So again, the RBCs are large and amoeboid. Chromatin is arranged in two or more masses. Pigment is usually arranged in more than one mass. Mature scission contain 12 to 24 merocytes, and mass of pigment is usually organized in one or two clumps. So here you can see the thick smear with lot of merocytes inside. It's a mature scission. Here you can see a thin smear with a merocyte, very nicely seen. We can see the pigment and merocytes both. Here you can see a ruptured scission of Plasmodium vivax in a thin blood smear showing pre-merocytes and pigment. Hope we are in line with whatever discussion is going on. Then when we talk about the scission and the merocytes, and it ultimately rupture and leads to release of microgametocytes. So these are microgametocytes. This is a thick smear. These are thin smears. So usually they are round to oval. Infected RBC is larger, as we know, and contains fine brown pigment. Suffner dot may be seen. Microgametocytes are usually the size of an uninfected RBC and have a paler blue, pink, or gray cytoplasm, as you can see. So this microgametocyte and macrogametocyte ultimately fuse and forms a eukaryote. As you can see, this is a thick smear showing eukaryote, and these are other forms of the parasite. This is a thin smear showing eukaryote, which is a combination of macrogametocyte and exflagellated microgametocytes. Eukaryotes invade epithelial cells of the mosquito midgut, where an oocyst is formed ultimately, which ultimately goes found in the peripheral blood of human host and are very rarely found on blood space. So this was about eukaryote. Now we will come on Plasmodium falciparum. So falciparum, as we already discussed, that falciparum is having RBC which are not enlarged, which are round. So we will expect a normal RBC morphology in falciparum. So you can see the RBCs are normal in size, and you can see the ring form first. This is the thick smear. This is again the thick smear, which is not showing any RBCs because they are lysed, and we can see only the rings. This is the Walkman sepet ring. These are the acoliforms or the applicoforms, where the ring is almost on the brim of the RBC. So beautiful, beautiful when you see it. This is clear cut Plasmodium falciparum. Then the Morer's cleft. This can be seen in Plasmodium falciparum infection, which contains ring form trophocytes, and these resembles the Suffner's dot falciparum. They play a role in the metabolic pathway of the infected RBCs. So now ring form, Morer's cleft, and then comes the trophozoite develop. Here you can see a ring, but it is more thicker and more compact. The amount of pigment in chromatin may also increase. This is the thick smear showing the ring, and you can see the pigment and chromatin coming in. They are compact or amoeboid forms. Delay, compact and amoeboid forms may be seen when we have a delay in the processing of the blood. This is a gametocyte. This is again a trophozoite, again a trophozoite, again a trophozoite. This is the thick smear. Then gametocyte of Plasmodium falciparum. It's a crescent sepate, beautiful sausage sepate, banana sepate structure, which is about 1.5 times the diameter of the RBC, as you can see. 1.5 times the diameter of the RBC. Usually a darker, deeper blue structure. The cytoplasm is usually more pale. The red chromatin and pigment is more coarse and concentrated in than the microgametotypes. Sometimes in thin blood smear, the remnants of the host RBC can be seen. So sometimes when we see the thin smear, this is the thick smear, you can see the gametocyte of Plasmodium falciparum. These are ring forms and trophocyte forms. And here you can see again a ring form. Then this is the gametocyte, and this is the remnant of the host RBC here. Here, this is called as Lavran's pig. Very typical for a Plasmodium falciparum. Rare to see, but it looks beautiful, like a sunrise. So the gametocyte in the upper right is undergoing H flagellation. Here you can see. So when the sample is processed late, the gametocyte can undergo flagellation, H flagellation, and we can see such forms which were not there into the person's blood, but created as the process sample was processed late. Now, cyanogens are rarely seen in peripheral Plasmodium falciparum infection, except in very severe cases, which contains 8 to 24 merozytes. A mature cyanogen usually fills about two-thirds of the infected RBCs. So, this was about the morphology of falciparum and vivax. Now, we will quantify how much infection is there in the blood. Sorry, excuse me. So, when we talk about the quantification or the determination of the parasitemia, it can be done on thick and thin smear both. The thick smear, we will count almost 200 WBCs and all the infected RBCs that we detect. And then we do calculate the number of parasites per microliter of blood through this formula. This is the WBC count. It depends what your count is. So then thin smear, which most of us give the parasitemia index through the thin smear only. So we count minimum of 500 RBC. I count 1000 RBCs. Usually a field contains, it depends how your slide is made, but usually a field contains 150 to 200 RBCs. So if we see 5 to 6 fields, we can almost check 1000 RBCs, and we can then correlate that how many RBCs are there in how many parasites are there in 100 RBCs. So let's assume I see 10 RBCs, 10 parasites in 1000 RBCs, then the parasitic index will be 1%. Secondly, one important point while counting for parasitemia is multiple infected RBCs are counted as one only. Gametocytes are not figured into the calculation. That is very important point. We don't count gametocytes, count RBC which are infected, and multiply infected RBCs are counted as one. So this is a rough estimate, of course. Moreover, in severe infections, cytons tend to be sequestrated in spleen, liver, brain, and other internal organs, which very high may not be mirrored. So when there is a very high infection, severe infection rate, the peripheral circulation parasitemia must not be that much, but we will see a lot of parasites in spleen, liver, and brain, and other internal organs. We also have ELISA kits to detect malaria, which is based on sandwich ELISA and detection of all four plasmodium species through lactate dehydrogenase antigen. Then we have so we talked about rapid test, the golden microscopy test, ELISA test. Now what next? Next is PCR. So PCR is capable of identifying as few as 1 to 10 parasites per microliter of blood. The problem with PCR, very labor intensive, takes a lot of time. Now people are also doing plasmodium genomic DNA extraction through 200 microliter whole blood. So PCR is one of the tests which can be used to isolate malaria, but it is a very time consuming and laborious test. We can also do antibody detection through indirect fluorescent assay. We can also use Buffy code fluorescent assay, through which we can see Vivex falciparum. Then what next? We have nucleic acid amplification test too, which can detect 1 to 20 parasite per microliter input. And although it is very highly sensitive and specific, it is randomly used in endemic areas because having a very high cost and requires a skilled personnel with us. Similarly, we can have a variant of NAT, which is called as LAMP, loop mediated isothermal amplification, that provides simplicity and rapidity as opposed to PCR. Then we also have an ultraviolet visible spectrometer, which confirms malaria cases via changes in the excitation peak through gold and silver nanoparticle absorption. Similarly, we have surface enhanced Raman spectroscopy, Fourier transform infrared and Raman spectroscopy, which are vibrational spectroscopic systems. So everyone is trying, but still we have not reached where we want to reach. So there is one more thing which is coming in ahead is automated AI-based detection of the malarial pigment or the malarial parasite. So we can create, Fajullah et al. Has proposed an automated convolutional neural network model for malaria detection, while Few has given k-nearest neighbor model for CNN algorithm. So now where we are going ahead, the way ahead is machine learning algorithm. Very tough because we need a uniform mission in our slide making for this. Secondly, we need a lot of properly taken photos to feed it to AI. So machine learning algorithm is the future of spectroscopic malaria detection. So this was about the diagnosis and now what we have ahead. We have vaccine from WHO known as RTS-S/A-S01 malaria vaccine for the children living in regions with moderate to high Plasmodium falciparum levels. This vaccine has shown significantly reduction in malaria. In 2023, WHO recommended a second safe and effective malaria vaccine called as R21 Metrixap, which is going to be broad-scale deployment across Africa, possibly ahead. So this was about the vaccine. Hope it comes in a cheaper rate ahead so that the world can be malaria free. Then about the treatment, I will not go much into the treatment part. It is mostly artemisinin-based combination therapy for Plasmodium falciparum. For VIVEX, we use chloroquine and primaquine also for preventing the relapses. Then what about the how can we prevent malaria? That every one of us know, use mosquito nets, use mosquito repellents like DEET, 3535, use coils, vaporizers, window screens. There is one more idea which is going on in research is genetic modification of the mosquitoes. I don't know how much it will help ahead, but that's also in research that genetic modification of the mosquitoes so that they don't spread malaria. So, this was about the prevention and now the elimination. When we call it as malaria elimination, it is called as malaria elimination when interruption of local transmission of a specified malaria parasite species in a defined geographical area as a result of deliberate activities. And continue measures to prevent re-establishment of transmission are always required. So, for now, there are few 34 to 40 countries which are now malaria free. Countries that have achieved at least 3 consecutive years of indigenous cases of malaria are eligible to apply for WHO certification of malaria elimination. Uh, Now, recently in 2015, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and other countries have been declared malaria free. One more interesting observation is asymptomatic malaria cases are known to be prevalent in endemic areas and are generally untreated, resulting in a significant source of gametocytes that may serve as a reservoir of disease transmission. So we have to close this link to the reservoir of disease transmission. So this was about the start and the elimination till of malaria. Now we will talk about some take-home messages. So हमने इतना सारा पढ़ा पर ultimately a supportive supervision and training to the health worker to use microscopy and rapid diagnostic kits still play a key role in malaria service delivery in India. Around malaria management policy can't be same everywhere, by the way. In highly endemic areas where laboratory support is not available, rapid diagnostic kits are still the number one thing which we can rely upon. PCR is no doubt very superior and can detect 5 microliter of blood parasite values too, while it takes longer than microscopy, but it's very time consuming and very costly. But still, microscopy is the gold standard, and the JIMSA strain will do wonders for malaria microscopy. So currently, rapid diagnostic test kits, although with low sensitivity, remains a better option for low resource regions, merited by detection limit at least 10 times higher than microscopy and PCR, and simplicity and POCT usability without specialized equipment. So now the way ahead is artificial intelligence, the nanotechnology, and the multimodal system. Let's see how it unfolds. These are my references. This is the quote which I smiled upon. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. Thank you very much. Malaria is still preventable and curable. The key is having a rapid diagnosis and treatment. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shelgaonkar. That was very, very informative. We tend to take malaria for granted even today. That,
Yeah,
everybody worries about dengue, lepto, chikungunya, scrub typhus, but somehow malaria is still a silent killer because
agreed.
somewhere it slips in undetected. And I believe till 2017, 18, till the government took corrective action, a lot of the testing was happening using antibody-based tests which have a tendency to give false positives time and time again. And subsequent to that, the treatment would be prescribed, and thereafter there would be the building up of antimicrobial resistance. So, it was leading us down the wrong path till the government took the action of banning antibody tests in all formats of malaria testing. But sir, a little bit of a little effort here on our part on how do you see the emerging technologies? I mean, I know you brushed upon it in speaking on AI and machine learning. And while it is a complicated process, I believe the first steps have already been made because I was in touch with the company in Bangalore, which was taking the photographs of the smears and using AI to analyze them. Given that, yeah, and even CRISPR-based diagnostics is transforming malaria diagnosis. So where do you see that? Do you see that, especially in the hospitals and chains which are on the upper side of the financial spectrum, do you see them taking up AI in any way going forward? Is there any, initiatives that are in process right now?
For malaria, the initiatives are not much, but yeah, for peripheral smear, for diagnosing leukemias, for diagnosing basic peripheral smear anomalies, they are trying. But the problem with the peripheral smear is, first of all, it should be harmonized and it should be uniform. So that has been solved by the modern slide analyzers and the sample analyzers, which are having a slide system too with them. But still, the AI needs a Z-axis too in malaria, and that Z-axis is the issue which is actually bothering in cytology, in tests like detection of malaria. That Z-axis is creating trouble. So it will take a lot of time, but still it is possible. But hospitals are not towards that for now. They are more towards platelet count and everything. Malaria अभी लोग focus नहीं कर रहे हैं hospitals और lab में. But yeah, I think this is the future coming ahead. But that can't replace rapid diagnostic kits for sure, because rapid diagnostic kits are very faster, and for making a AI-based diagnosis on slide, you need a slide proper. Then you need a lot of data to have whole slide imaging data of that much of potential, because you have to scan the whole slide and then you have to apply your AI algorithm. So that's very costly for now. But in coming years, maybe if the data is more cheaper and the films and the pics are more taken seriously, then you never know, it will be one of the key parameters to make diagnose malaria. But in still the rural areas and the countries like Africa, rapid diagnostic kits will be the first choice, I feel.
I agree with you. What about, sir, between the rapid test, which is again a diagnosis based in the laboratory, and you said they have a very high NPV, the what about point of care testing? Because especially at the physician level and things, I think that if POCT tests can take off and we have a system wherein faster diagnosis can happen at the physician level, curing it would be that much easier, treatment would be that much more stepped up.
Obviously, that should be done. I feel that should be done, and that will create a lot of good things for India, because in India, malaria is quite, and I will say it's endemic only. I've seen a patient, I will tell you a story. I have seen a patient 2 months back. He was 21-year-old boy. I live in Indore, and he was from a small place near to Indore. He had both malaria and dengue. He came to us.
Oh,
After 3 days, he showed to some GP, no tests were done, and till the time he came to us, the malaria was falciparum, so it reached his brain too, and we were not able to save him. So I
oh.
felt very bad. So had it been a rapid diagnostic kit, like when we say urine pregnancy kit, if there had been something like that and economical too at the same time, we could have saved his life. Or a POCT also, which you are mentioning correctly.
So it's surprising that malaria and dengue happening at the same time. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
there is I've been in diagnostics for 18 years. I haven't heard that one happening, you know.
Yeah, yeah, they are there. They are there. We see a lot of cases. We do PCRs in our hospital too. So we see chikungunya and malaria together too. So we have seen a lot
Yeah, of
of
course,
cases
I
this
understand.
last 2 months.
Chikungunya, in fact, PCR is the moving way forward, also positive, because it's the only
Way
antigen-based test
forward.
around. Otherwise, you have to wait for 7 days for an
Yeah,
IgM testing to be done. Right.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Though the PCR based test will not help much, because the treatment is still symptomatic only in chikungunya.
It's just about
So
having, it's
yeah,
in diagnostics.
having that diagnosis. Yeah,
If
yeah,
you,
yeah.
if
Obviously.
there are no cures for a lot of diseases, but if you get the diagnosis right, you solve half the problem, at least in your head,
Uh,
and
uh,
the clarity is there on which road to proceed on. Otherwise, you are running in various directions, and even febrile illnesses can be very confusing at a point of time.
Agree. There is one more interesting fact about malaria is, when we talk about the treatment part of artemisinin and everything, there are cases of artemisinin resistance too. happening in African regions. So that's why WHO is trying that malaria should be diagnosed first and then only treated, because the over treatment may create a genetic resistance to
Yes,
the drugs for
I was
malaria.
coming to that question about the rise of drug-resistant malaria strains. What kind of tools, diagnostic tools will be required? What kind treatment is, of course, a separate issue, but what kind of diagnostic tools will be required? Because you talked about latent trophozoites, that latent infections which can't be
Yeah,
known.
yeah,
Those slip through the
yeah,
radar. So where do
yeah.
you think we as as anybody in the IBD sector could make steps to what would you recommend? How should we track that particular strain? Because that's where the future is.
I think there should be something with liver. What liver is releasing, the liver cell is releasing when it gets infected. I don't know, and I have no clue on that. But if you can
I'm
dig
just
onto
hoping for
it,
answers, sir.
you can find some answer. You can find some answer.
Well, our
You
R&D
have
can always
to.
find an answer provided,
Yeah, yeah.
just the right, you point us in the right direction and we get going after that.
That will give you a big edge. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shelgaonkar. Thank you, Govind. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen, for joining us today. It's been a very enlightening session on malaria because, as Dr. Sir said, malaria is preventable and curable. The key is having a rapid diagnosis and treatment. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. For our next webinar on healthcare associated infections by Dr. Upasana Bhumla from Adesh Institute AIMS Bhatinda. Right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Good evening. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Jai Hind. Thank you, Arjun. Thank you very much. Good day. Thank you, Govind.